Gold Knot Titles podcast is brought to you by Land Trust Title Services, your partners for results. Well, hello again, everybody. This is our June 26th version of Market Trends. I'm here with my colleague, co-host, Matt Lombardi. Matt, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you, Steve.
Yes. We have breaking news.
We have big news.
This is big news.
Kick it off, and this is so big.
Yeah, so in the Chicagoland market, the largest player in the market, privately owned, is Baird & Warner, been around since 1855. Over 20 plus offices, a major force in Chicago real estate, and they have just become bigger and better, Matt, with their acquisition of Dreamtown. Do you have any stats on Dreamtown, Matt?
Dreamtown is, I forget how old they are.
They're over 20 plus years old.
So over 20 plus years, they have, as of in 2024, their sales were $1.5 billion.
Wow.
And I think they were number 5 or 6 in the Chicago marketplace.
Wow.
So a big player. Great similarities, and we can get into the culture fit and all that, but I think, you want to hear my take on it?
Yes, I want to hear your take, Matt.
I think we've talked about it on this podcast many times, how consolidation is going to continue in the real estate industry. Mm-hmm. And this is just another example on the local front where two very similar companies are coming together to join forces to become bigger and ultimately a better organization.
Fantastic. A lot of details in terms of the merger and what's going to happen. But Matt, this is exciting, I think, for local players across the country to think about, hey, I'm not just going to let Compass or Caldwell or any of these behemoths buy up the market. We're going to find like-minded brokers in our market, and we're going to team up to make the local brand. And we had on our last podcast, Matt, the differences between local, and Steve Baird actually commented on it, local and corporate. There's advantages to both. And I think here you're going to see two powerhouses come together and hopefully form something great. So congratulations to both of them.
Yeah, and what is going to happen with this acquisition is Baird & Warner will now be number 2 based on market share.
In Chicagoland?
They have now jumped to number 2, but they are will be in the local independently owned brokerage.
Yeah.
Which is, and like I mentioned just a moment ago, the culture fit and the personalities of both companies, I feel, are very similar. Locally grown, pro-Chicago, focused on technology, agent-centric, and ultimately consumer-centric.
Yeah, Matt, you want to hear my take on it too?
I do.
Okay. So these are two brands that have distinct nuances and qualities to them. And I think that they are going to meld together great. And I think they're going to both become better because of it. It's not just one buying another because they're fledgling or any of these things, but you see two really vibrant brands coming together. So that's really exciting. I think the agents are excited. There'll always be some that say, oh, I don't like change. I don't like this, but embrace it and let's move forward.
Yeah. So exciting news today, real-time news.
Okay, Matt, we had Chairman Powell in the Fed meeting on June 18th. No rate cut. I think people were, there was some rumor, some hope. Trump was putting pressure on Jerome Powell about it. But nevertheless, what are the details of this?
So, as Steve mentioned, the Fed met last week. Jerome Powell, Chairman Jerome Powell, put his stake in the ground and said, we are not moving rates. Mm-hmm. There's too many things swirling out there in the economy that say we need to wait.
Okay.
Some of those things are the inflation outlook. And this is something that he pointed out that a lot of people were saying, no, that's not going to happen. But they were saying last week that by the end of this year, we may see 3% inflation.
So he's afraid that inflation is going to creep up, and he doesn't want to lower interest rates with rising inflation.
Now, conversely to that, by the end of this year, they're potentially forecasting 3% inflation. But moving into next year, it may be around 2%.
Okay.
And part of this is the whole tariff discussion that we've talked about and has been out there being discussed ad nauseum. Mm-hmm. But the reality is the tariffs are going to create some pain at some point up front. And the question is, who is going to pay for this
pain? Right.
And so there's many people economists saying the consumer is ultimately going to pay. There's some companies or people saying companies are going to pick up the tab.
And Trump is saying China's just going to eat it.
Right, and
okay,
countries are just going to pay for it. So that's one of the big factors in the labor market has been pretty steady. You know, some points in there, new college graduates, I feel bad for you. There's so much stats and articles going out recently saying what a tough time it is for you. So I feel for you. But overall, the numbers, and that's what economists look at, the labor market has been pretty good. 135,000 jobs were added last month, with employment hovering just a percent, which is good.
Right.
You know, but you add in external risks, which we talked about the tariff, but also now with what's going on in the Middle East, what's still happening in Ukraine, all those geopolitical global forces creates uncertainty. And what does the market hate most, Steve?
Uncertainty.
Correct.
And you know, Matt, when you're changing, when you're trying to create peace in areas that have been nonstop war, or when you're trying to reset the economy with the tariffs that Trump's doing, there is a little bit of an unknown, but it seems to me like the tenor has been that the damage from the tariffs, the freaking out, all that, everything's going to get more expensive. I think we've seen some gas prices go down, as you mentioned. We've seen shelter costs trickling down a little bit or stabilizing.
So there's certain things.
Yeah.
And if you're a shopper in a grocery store, you're going to see certain items that, and I'm going to use coffee as an example.
Yes.
As an avid coffee drinker, for good or for bad, my coffee drinker friends out there, I buy a certain brand of Costco coffee.
Okay.
That not quite 3 years ago, I was paying $9.99 for a can of this coffee.
Okay.
The last time I bought it, $20.99.
Wow.
So either Costco, which I don't think they are, is passing that along to me, or that's what...
Yeah, coffee's getting more expensive.
So that's just an example.
What's the brand that Matt Lombardi drinks?
So this is the Kirkland.
Okay, Kirkland.
But I use it for a cold brew, not that anybody needs to know that.
Okay.
And it works very well. I'm a Starbucks Verona guy.
All right.
If I'm treating myself.
Okay. And if anyone wants to treat Matt, just send one over.
Yes.
Okay.
So the next Fed meeting is in July. There is speculation that there may be a rate cut. So poor Jerome Powell, he and his cohorts met and presented this on June 17th, and this poor guy was in front of the House Financial Services.
He was being blistered, Matt.
This week. And so he did get blistered, but it wasn't as bad a blister I think as everybody anticipated. You had some, Congress people saying, what are you doing? But he maintained, we got to wait and see. He's saying we're going to take a cautious approach to the interest cut because of what we just shared.
Yeah.
And then you have President Trump sending out tweets and truths saying he's ruining everything.
Right.
Rates got to come down today. He's the worst we've ever had, but he's still here.
Matt, and my take on Trump's tweets and nudgings are that he is setting the table up and putting pressure. Definitely, they're not going to raise during this period of time. And so he has set the table to kind of overemphasize that he should be lowering them. And so I think there is pressure on Jerome to lower them. And I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
And it is. And a couple of the Fed governors actually came out, I believe it was this week, and saying, yeah, we definitely need to lower it. And I believe Jerome Powell's tenure comes to an end early next year. I think it's a 10-year term, and so his term will end. There is speculation that I think I also saw he's going to resign this week. It's Thursday, he's not resigned. He's still
there.
Chairman of the Fed. So anyway, but yeah.
What does the Fed do, Matt?
Yeah, this was, I thought, something interesting because I don't think, unless you really look into it, it's like, what is the purpose of the Fed? And I've actually listened to a couple recent podcasts where they had a couple governors on saying, hey, here's what we do. And so I thought, what is the role of the Federal Reserve? So number one, controlling and managing our monetary policy, which means controlling inflation and supports our employment. So if the unemployment rate is super high, they're going to pull levers to change that. Regulation and supervision, they are overseeing and regulating all the banks out there. So all the banks that we know and use, they are regulated by the Fed. That's where the banks get their money from.
Yep.
That's the lending rate that's used. And they say, what's the rate?
So Matt,
The rate.
yep. Anything else?
Yeah, they also, financial services, they provide payment settlement services, operations for banks, and then they maintain financial stability, which means when we're in the middle of a pandemic, they're going to juice the system
Yep.
with printing money, which
Right.
is what happened during COVID. For good or for bad, the system was flooded. Our economy did not fall. You see what we see today, where things are still pretty good.
Yeah, Matt, you see a lot of, so for the conspiracy theorists out there, the book Jekyll Island, where the Fed met and was formed back in the day, that's a good one you can read. That's a good read. But Bernanke, I'm thinking of during the Big Short period of time, there's a lot of different things. I think Matt Damon actually narrated something where you had some people working on the banking side, then going back to the Fed and all this kind of thing. So it's a little bit, they're trying to give the impression that the fox is not watching the hen house here, but it seems very much intertwined. But they are trying to keep the presentation of we are the sane voice in the craziness of the market. And I think Jerome Powell, I don't blame him for holding it. I know people want him to lower the rates. We want him to lower rates. We want to see lower mortgage rates, but we'll have to wait and see for that in July.
Yeah. So from what I've seen and heard, that's their purpose. I think they've remained independent as much as possible.
Okay, maybe we'll have a separate podcast on the Jekyll Island thing, Matt.
Definitely could.
Okay, housing starts dropped 10% in May to lowest level since 2020. Let's talk about that, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, that's the headline right there. And this is for new construction. The new residential construction in May was mixed, but overall down over 10%. And this is something we've talked about numerous times previously, which is new construction, they're skittish based on labor constraints. Not enough labor out there, so you have to pay more for the labor than you have for the
demand,
but also just the wood.
The construction materials.
The materials,
yeah,
those have gone up tremendously.
And it's hard to speculate when you don't know what the tariffs are going to do.
Right. And so all those things add into one of the lowest, builder sentiment. They're not bullish. So new homes are being built, but not at the rate that we need it for now and for the future.
Man, I don't know did you add this to the thing, but we saw today that I think Chicagoland needs 270,000 more homes in order to fulfill the demand. So the demand is there, and Chicago is really one of the last on the list of, and we're going to cover that later, so I don't want to spoil our story.
But yeah, you're right. There is a huge demand, Chicago being one of the places that needs more housing. And we talked about multi-generational housing in our previous episode. More people are living in places together because of limited supply and how much it costs.
And so what are the strategies, Matt, that they're trying to employ? Are we going to see opportunities? Are we, for the buyer that wants to buy new construction, incentives? I think you're going to see creative things with financing, all these kind of things we're hearing.
Yeah, there's, the builders want to sell.
Yep.
So they're going to meet the...
Builders build.
Builders build, sellers sell.
Yes, sellers sell.
But yeah, these things will ultimately sell. But there's, Chicago and the Midwest are insulated from the craziness of other areas of the country. There's not this wild speculation. Everybody moving Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Arizona. Those housing markets go up and down quicker than others when things are good or when things are bad. Where us in the Midwest, we're like tortoise against the
We're steady, Freddie.
We're going to catch up to you eventually.
Yep.
We're going to do just that.
Matt, and I would say that in Florida and in Texas, if you have 700,000 homes on the market or whatever it is, you're not going to be the one to get in there and say, I'm going to start building homes unless they're spec, small, not these huge developments. So, Okay. Matt, we're on to Compass. They sued Zillow over the listing ban. Let's talk about that.
So this is another huge topic and big thing in the industry that everybody's talking about. And so we also are going to give our take on this.
Absolutely.
Compass, they're always in the news, and so they have now sued Zillow. And this is out of New York State Southern District Court. where Zillow is Compass is accusing Zillow of using anti-competitive tactics to protect its market dominance and revenue. And just as a refresher, Compass is all about their private listing network.
Their special secret squirrel book of list of homes that are exclusive.
The printed book that are now out there, and this exclusivity that only they could offer. And Zillow put their stake in the ground and said, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. I think it's a 3 strikes rule with Zillow that if you violate this policy, you'll be banned forever.
So in other words, you're not going to allow you to do this, as if you're on the private listing network, you will not be able to have access to the MLS or to the Zillow listings.
Correct. So this is just big in the industry. There's another lawsuit in our wonderful litigious society and another news-making thing. And so Zillow is going to be Zillow, and Compass is going to be Compass. And I don't know if they'll ever meet, and we'll see meet in the middle. But the courts will ultimately decide something one way or another. And I don't know the timing of this, but it's just another thing causing confusion for home sellers and buyers out there. Because ultimately, they or you are the ones going to be affected. When consumers see these new, they're not like you are in the real estate industry and understand what's actually happening here. But they may be coming to you with questions saying, hey, I want to list my house, but what's going on here? And maybe I want to put it on a private listing.
Right.
Or I don't want to put it on a private listing, and I got to be on Zillow. And so that's the counter argument to the private listing is consumers have been Zillified.
Yes.
And I may ask someone to trademark that for us.
I love it.
But Zillow has done such a good job of becoming part of the everyday part of people.
Yep.
Where you may not be interested in buying or selling a home, but you're going to look at Zillow for your Zestimate.
Yes.
You're going to look at what your neighbor's house sold, or what, you're looking at a lakefront property. What are these things out there? And so Zillow has really created this portal where it's more than just this real estate platform. It's become a part of just people's
everyday life. Yeah.
And so when consumers come and say to their agent, you mean I'm not going to go to a Compass agent? You mean my property's not going to be listed on Zillow? And that agent says no, because...
Hey, thanks for listening to the People, Not Titles podcast. We are brought to you by our great sponsors, Land Trust Title Services, your partners for results.
I can't put it on there. That, in my opinion, is going to cause a lot of pain, consternation, and may flip people from using a Compass agent to someone else.
So, Matt, we heard Steve Baird, local powerhouse CEO of Baird & Warner, comment today, hey, us local brokers are going to sit back, let them spend their money, let them fight about it. But I think as an agent, you need to be very clear on your value proposition and your strategy for selling a home, and be ready to talk about this in a way that's intelligent, articulate, and shows that you've considered it and you've chosen this plan to sell that home. And so I know you agents know that. Matt, Northwest Side Alder people. That might be the first time I've ever heard that. Alder people. Because not aldermen, it could be alder women.
Correct.
Okay. Northwest Side Alder people wound out of the anti-gentrification zone, saying it's punishing long-time homeowners. Who would have thought that this would come to that, Matt?
So the Northwest Side Housing Preservation Ordinance strikes again.
Oh.
So this was enacted earlier this year. We've talked about it, but just as a refresher, this is a certain zone of the Northwest Side of Chicago where this ordinance has been put in place to protect longtime residents,
longtime renters
from being adversely affected.
Pushed out of their homes by the big, bad real estate tycoons.
So we gave our take on it, which was, this is a big waste of time. It's confusion, a cluster, and not going to do anything. And two aldermen, Felix Cardona and Gilbert Valega, probably agree with us. And they say they're seeking to exclude their ward of the state.
They want out.
They say, we want no part of this ordinance because it's confusing and it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And now it's making the transaction harder because the mortgage, Fannie and Freddie, aren't going to guarantee it. And the title companies
are having a hard time
doing it.
Yep. So they want out. So we're starting to see support for this, even amongst the people that had buy-in before. These are the first guys to jump off the ship and say, I better be ahead of the curve here. They want to be they don't want to come around next time to say, you bought into this, you've limited housing, you've put a stranglehold on homeowners here. And so they want out, and I think it's going to be a trend that eventually is going to have this whole thing fracture and fall apart.
Yeah.
That's my prediction, Matt.
I agree 100%. This is confusion and not a good thing. The aldermen, their concerns are over complexities and delays caused by the pilot program, hindering older homeowners from selling their property. That is the last thing you want to happen, is to affect people's ability to easily and freely sell their rightful property.
Absolutely.
And yes, I am all for the long-term renters, local residents. I mean, you go on certain parts of the city, you do see it.
Yep.
So the intent is always good of this.
Right.
The management oversight and the ultimate outcome of things like this, not good.
Matt, and if I'm a homeowner, I own an 8-unit building, and I have great renters there. I think if you're thinking about selling, you're open to talking to the renters. You're open to talking about passing on that property to and there's a lot of protections already for these renters in terms of lease guarantees and all these kind of things. So I believe that this was an overreach and probably some grandstanding to say I'm for the little guy, and the little guy and the homeowner are losing in this one.
This is our city of Chicago bureaucracy at its best.
Matt, let's debunk we heard 80%, the 80-20 rule. 80% of the people do 20% of the work, and 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Or in the real estate nomenclature, there's this top echelon of 20% of agents that are doing 80% of the deals. This has turned out to be false.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the numbers, Matt.
So a gentleman named Mike Del Prepay.
Easy for you to say.
Logic, he is actually suggesting that it's more of a 65-20 split in real estate. And some bullet points here. The top 1% of the agents and high production teams handle 18% of all deals. And agent productivity varies. The top 20% average 26 transactions annually, while the remaining 80% average only 3.5 transactions per year.
So,
go on,
Matt, it seems to me that the rule is actually the productive ones are making hay, the good ones are doing deals, and the ones that are on the bottom of the list are doing less than we thought.
Doing less, but still enough to make the list. So
okay.
There's a lot of still lower producing, low production agents that are still out there. But yes, the best of the best, the top producers, the agent teams that are involved in making things happen, they are still involved doing the majority of the transactions. So the 80-20 rule, I would agree, is just a good baseline, but the reality is 20% of the agents are doing 65% of the business.
Matt, and so what I see, what does that mean in the real estate brokerage world? One of the things is, before you had these big offices with multiple desks and everyone standing around drinking coffee, taking up space, using the toilet paper, all that kind of thing. Well, guess what? I see now smaller offices, more nimble, production happening. A lot of these producers are not in the office. They're on the streets. They're doing this. They're doing that. So I think you're going to see the structure of offices change. I think you're going to see the support for agents change. This idea that I'm going to bring people on to have them do 1 or 2 deals. Maybe that'll happen, but it's going to happen in a much different way.
Yeah, I mean, you top producers out there, you have your business plan, you have your model, you have your team, you have your network. You know how to work and do what needs to be done. And hopefully your brokerage, if you work for a brokerage, have tools and systems that you leverage to make your life easier, make you more productive, and do what you do best, which is meeting people and networking, but creating those relationships so when and if the time comes for someone to buy and or sell their property, they're going to look to you versus someone else.
Matt, now I think this is why we're seeing a big rising up of teams, because you have these lower producers that don't know the business that well, that it's hard to get mentorship and all that. So now you can join a team and be useful, showings, buyer agents, all these kind of things. And at the same token, you have these rainmaker big agents that are like, hey, I can share some of the wealth and do more volume, and I can bring in some of these eager beavers that aren't able to quite get over the hump production-wise and leverage them to build and grow their brand. So I think teams is going to be a big thing.
And the leaders of those teams, I think they identify their strengths and weaknesses well. I may be great at the relationship, but I'm not great at hosting an open house.
Yep.
This agent is.
Yep.
I'm going to have her on my team.
Absolutely.
You know, so that's an example.
Awesome. National market stats, Matt.
So, national market stats, I would say my take on everything thus far, and Steve, you may or may not agree with me, it's been flat.
Yes. About the same. I feel like I'm living 2024 over.
So we were saying with hope and just wanting things to go around.
Speak it into existence.
2025 is going to be the year that things turn around.
It's going to break open.
Right. We can't get any lower.
Right. I remember that.
Well, we've gotten lower. And it's flat at best. So the latest market stats for national is median time on market is 27 days. That's down from 29 days. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but 30% of sales were first-time home buyers. 27% of transactions were all cash sales. 17% of transactions were individual investors or second home buyers. And these are all pretty much flat month over month and year over year. And just at the high level, inventory is just over 4.5 months, which is significantly higher than this time last year, which was 3.8 months.
So inventory has ticked up a little bit.
Inventory has ticked up, but in terms of sales, it's just over 4 million seasonally adjusted annual rate of sales.
Less than 1% change.
Less than 1% change month over month and year over year.
Okay.
So essentially flat. Now, median sales price is still increasing. Just over 1% year over year. That's almost $423,000 base price, which once again is crazy. So, but there is some news that just came out today that's not even on your sheet.
Let's hear it, Matt.
So Justin, pending home sales index increased 1.8% in May. And that's plus just over 1% year over year. So that is something that NAR uses users to track what's coming down the pipeline.
So in other words, they're seeing a little bit of an increase here,
so
1.1%.
Contractually, so that there is an uptick. So there is some positive news with that. One thing I wanted to mention that I had put in your notes, Steve, is mortgage rate. Mortgage rates have come down slightly.
Okay. Not
a lot, but slightly. So a 30-year fixed is down to around 6.7 to 6.8%, depending on where
it's a couple 0.2 or something down.
15-year fixed rate is under 6% now, 5.9, 5.95, depending on where you're at. And mortgage applications were actually up this week.
Fantastic.
So you take the good, the bad with the good. The bottom line, in my opinion, is we were hoping that a year ago, June 2025 was going to be
a breakout
higher with what's happening.
Yep.
It's literally flat.
Okay. Matt, let's talk about Chicago Metro. What do we have here?
So Chicago Metro, I would say, is flat or slightly down. So closed sales is down 5%. Median sales price is up 5.5%. Inventory of homes for sale, this is a good thing, is up just over 3%. Days on market is almost identical at 23 days. And once again, nothing earth-shattering. It's flat.
Yeah.
The median sales price continues to go up, which is now $360,000, which is once again crazy to me.
Yep.
But it is what it is. And, supply and demand are driving the marketplace.
Yeah, and it's different in several markets. I was looking Anna Marie Island. I was spent my time. Is where I got a little bit of tan, Matt. Last year, the average sales price over last 30 days was $2.9 million on that island.
That's all?
Last year, and this year it's $2.1 million. So that's a pretty significant, that's a 30% drop.
And once again, depending on where you're at in the country, there's going to be those swings in what the sales price is. That's the beauty, or depending on how you look at it, the good or bad part of the Chicago and or Midwest marketplace. It's pretty
stable,
low and steady, and we're seeing appreciation still, but as we predicted and what we said in the last couple episodes, is it's going to flatten out and maybe be a little lower by the end of the year.
Let's talk across the border, north, Matt, Wisconsin.
Across the border in Wisconsin, monthly home sales are down 2%. Listings are up 8.5% in the state.
So that could portend a good end of the summer.
So that's a good thing. And median home sales price is up just over 4%, and it's at $330,000 at the same point, 0.5. Inventory, months of inventory is up to 4 months, which is just over 8%.
Nice.
Those are all good things. Wisconsin, still a lot happening, especially in the northern Wisconsin, Bay, Appleton area, but also obviously
Milwaukee Metro,
Wisconsin, Lake Geneva, Delaware. That's always a hot market.
Absolutely.
For Chicago people who want to live there.
Yep, we love it.
A lot of stuff. What do you got?
Nothing. What do we got?
We have realtors, attorneys, anybody who's watching and or listening.
Oh my gosh.
July 9th, 11 a.m. Steve is moderating with our special guest, Alan Stern, a Zoom presentation on how to become a networking expert.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, I go to networking events all the time and all that, but I can tell you, if you can get one more strategy, one more skill, one more nuance to help you make the time more valuable, it'd be worth it for you. So tune in. We will have that Zoom, and seating is limited, Matt, even if it's virtual.
Seating is limited, and the best part is all attendees are going to get a free book.
Woo! Yes.
By my friend Steve here.
Yep, and it is rave reviews. A lot of 5 stars, and it's 5 out of 5, Matt, not like 5 out of 10.
No, and I've read the book. It is excellent.
Yep.
And
Rotten Tomatoes rates it very high, just everything.
Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you can find and become a better networker.
100%. Networking is not a talent, it's a skill, and you can learn it.
Absolutely.
Matt, that ends our...
for the month of June, we're done.
Yeah, for the month of June, we're done. We will see you next week.
Take care.
Market Trend signing off.
Hey, thanks for listening to the People Not Titles podcast. We are proudly sponsored by Land Trust Title Services. If you enjoyed the podcast, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. And we'd love it if you'd share our podcast with your friends. Thanks a lot.